Hey, happy Wednesday. Game time with KIV on this beautiful evening. We're going to hit a lot of things tonight because we've got Andrew McGinnis on deck. We'll bring him in here in a minute. We're going to talk some college basketball, some NBA, and of course, some NHL with one of our resident NHL handicappers. So if you guys have a question, you know the drill. Drop it in the chat. I'm live here on Instagram. We've got our producer, Dan, manning the YouTube channel in case we get any comments over there or on Facebook. So if you guys are watching from any of those various outlets, please drop us a question you have. We're going to get right into it. Bottom line, 0-3 this week. Not happy about it. We'll call it the systems that I've been using have been good over the last 5 years, but they have been very frustrating this week. TCU loses on Monday as a unranked home favorite. That one never had a shot. But last night, Kansas, up at half, sizable, and allows BYU to go on a 41-27 run. Not ideal, but at least they lost outright. That was my saving grace. And then, of course, Mississippi State also, I believe they were up 8 at halftime over Kentucky. Kentucky looks good right now. I know some friends of mine that bet them to win the whole thing, and I actually don't hate those bets. Tonight, Auburn at Tennessee. We laid it with Tennessee, 6.5 last night. If you go to the Pickett app, you guys can see where all my bets are. They're linked to my various betting accounts. Most likely Hard Rock, though, because I'm in Florida most of the time. Tennessee, absolute and utter stout defense. I know Auburn has a solid defense of their own. They've surprised a lot of people, but they've laid a couple stinkers on the road. Mississippi State at Florida. I think they lay another one tonight here in Knoxville. Another game that I ended up on, similar type of situation. Of course, Texas A&M laying 5 at home versus South Carolina. This one looks really short, or really steep, for a Texas A&M team who has dropped 4 straight. Man, they're frustrating. Let's just hope they get it done tonight against the South Carolina team who has been absolutely solid outside of the last couple of weeks. Auburn loss, really ugly one, and then a close one at home to LSU. Had a nice bounce back at Ole Miss. But let's see if the Aggies can't get that unranked trend back in the black. Andrew McGinnis, let's bring him in. We've got some questions already here in the chat. Welcome in, Andrew. Host of Puck Time with Carmine Bianco. Great spot to learn all things hockey. Those guys have been so helpful in teaching me how to handicap hockey, at least from the prospect of going to the game, of course. Used to just bet face-offs. Opening face-offs, Andrew, was my thing when I was there. It was just an immediate rush. It was awesome. Now we're a little bit more refined. Talk to me about what you've got going on over at Wagertalk, and then we'll get into some of these matchups for tonight.
Kelly, good being here with you as always. 5% play for me actually tonight in the NHL. Super excited about it. And you know what's funny is I always find it funny when people say they've been looking for a spot. There's been a spot they've been waiting for quite some time, or a week time or whatever. But this was actually tonight's bet. I've actually had my eye on this spot for a little while. Good situational play. So I do have that going, 5% play. Also an MLB special. Most people are selling right now their full year specials, but I want people to get to know me right now in the MLB. So this is MLB through the All-Star break. And I was number 2 in MLB totals last year at Wagertalk, and number 6 overall, close to 30 handicappers at Wagertalk. So I know I'm known for hockey, Canadian football, but show me some love, guys, with baseball. I was on a good roll last year.
Yeah, Andrew, didn't you get into baseball, actually starting with Korean baseball with Adam Trigger? Is that where your love for baseball came from?
I've always liked baseball, but I'll tell you what, I learned the statistics and like kind of the advanced metrics, all that stuff more when I was doing the KBO. Because Kelly, I didn't know their names. I didn't know any of their names. I didn't know who these guys were in Korea. So it was all data driven. Like those picks, none of them were to do with power hitters or great pitchers, or I didn't know any of them. That's the thing. Like you look at Tokyo Brandon, he actually knows like every single player in the lineup. When I was doing KBO, it was just all numbers.
You know, 2020 was a tough time for a lot of us. Nicaraguan soccer, Russian table tennis, Korean baseball. we did what we had to do to get by, but I remember that run kept me highly entertained that summer. Andrew is going to field all your NHL questions. I'm going to help field some of the NBA, and we're going to field some college basketball as well. I've got a question here about Providence in the chat. Let me pull this game up and why I didn't end up getting to the window with them. Marquette. This is a Marquette team that has been really solid outside, well, basically all year outside of that loss to Connecticut, which I did take the points, lay the points with UConn in that ranked versus ranked situation. Marquette, really solid defense here. I actually got to watch this Providence team in real life. One of K-State's overtime games, shocker, was a loss for this team in the Bahamas at the Baha Mar tournament. Now in Big East play, they have just been kind of on a roller coaster ride. They went in that 4-game losing stretch, kind of bounced back with some mediocre teams, DePaul, Georgetown. And now they've kind of went on a decent run. They got the best of St. John's at home, then beat up on DePaul. Nice road win at Xavier. Now still on the road facing a Marquette team who, well, has Creighton on deck. So this could be a flat spot. I did not end up getting to the window with Providence, but whoever asked me that in the questions, sorry, it's way too many ago. No, Tyler Kolek. I did see that Music City Bets, that he did not make grades, and we were trying to find somebody else who reported on that. So if that is true, double check that, because I was unable to find a secondary source. One of the best players for Marquette, Tyler Kolek, supposedly did not make grades. So keep an eye there. If you guys have an NHL question, we can jump into it here with Andrew. Or Andrew, you're welcome to talk about a game that maybe didn't make your card tonight on the ice.
Kelly, the late game, look, it's the NHL schedule makers doing their thing. I mean, just doing what they do best right now, with giving you like 10, 13 games on one night. The next night they give you 2, right? That's just what they do. And I'm not really surprised by it anymore. But Blues and Oilers, massive favorites here for the Edmonton Oilers. I like the under. So a lot of times when I see these massive favorites, I kind of try and steer away from playing a side. Whether, I look at team totals, puck lines and stuff like that, but I'll look towards totals here. And this Edmonton team overall, especially since hiring their new coach, have transformed into a much more defensive team. But especially when they're playing teams that just strictly do not have that offensive firepower. And that's the St. Louis Blues. The Oilers have slipped up recently on defense when playing some of the superior teams in the league, some of the top teams in the league. But when playing non-playoff teams, they have really been able to shut them down. And the Blues have actually been a good player prop team, because even though there's 4 lines out there, you know who's going to score for them, right? If it's not Robert Thomas, if it's not some of the main guys on that team, then they're not going to score. And so Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas, some guys I'm looking at for props tonight for the Blues. But I think the under 6.5 is a great bet tonight. I think Edmonton locks things down defensively. I think the last few games for them are a little bit messier than they would have liked. And now they get a non-playoff team. They're playing at home tonight. I obviously like the Edmonton side, but they're close to minus $3 here, Cal. We'll look towards under 6.5 in the late night game tonight.
6.5. Those always make me a little nervous, right? So, Andrew, I started getting into hockey when the Blackhawks kind of went on those Stanley Cup runs. And then we started seeing like a plethora of scoring, right? I mean, what was this, 5-6 years ago now? They made the pads smaller. They made the goals bigger because they realized Americans want goals. You want to get Americans in love with hockey? What does soccer do wrong? It's boring. We watch them struggle to score for 90 minutes. So in hockey, what do we want? We want goals. I think the NHL did a really good job with that. But then we saw totals that were typically 5, 5.5, 6 was steep. Now the 6.5 comes in all the time. We are not devoid of seeing 7, 8, 9, 10 goal games. I mean, you just check your score app and it's almost nightly. At what point do you start to look at totals in the NHL and say, you know what, I just have to stay away here? Not necessarily, I know the goalie matchups matter a lot from a metric standpoint, but from certain offenses that just keep just shots on goal, the differential is like double versus their opponents.
It's a really good point. I mean, whether it's them doing the scoring or their opponent, some teams it's over or pass, right? We always hear about teams, people say that, oh, the public likes to bet overs. The popular thing to do is to bet overs. And I get that. But at the same time, there's some teams that they're really shitty, for lack of better words, on defense, but really talented offensively. And with those teams, you just don't want to look for spots to bet unders. That's for sure. But it's a really good point you mentioned. I mean, I remember many years ago, it was 5.5s and the rare 6, like you said. Now it was 6s, and then it was the rare 6.5, and now 6.5 is as common as can be. And we'll see 7s. And one thing interesting, Kelly, the 7s have a really, really, really big rate to the under, because it's either been a push or it's going under. And I'm not sure what it is. We can explain it, but getting to 8 seems to be a lot harder than getting to 7, right? 4-3 seems to be a very common score line. Obviously 5-2 as well. But then once you get that 7 even total, you're asking teams to get to 8 goals, which is a lot harder. So I'm with you. And, sometimes you see these 5.5s, and they're 5.5s for a reason. They're giving you 5.5s because they're the 2 most defensive teams in the league, or 2 teams that just simply cannot score. Like the Blackhawks. When Connor Bedard got injured, he's the next generational player of the league. When he got injured for the Blackhawks, they went under 5.5. And I think like every game but 2 that he was out for them. I mean, this team just couldn't do anything. So sometimes, even though it's 5.5 and it's low for a reason.
I love it. If you are new to Wager Talk, or you're new to watching Game Time Picks, Game Time 7 is going to be your promo code. That gives you a 7-day all access pass for just $49. That also comes out to just $7 a day. That is good for all Wager Talk handicappers except for Las Vegas Chris, and of course VR Ace Yanni the Greek. That goes Sunday through midnight. If you guys are looking for that, Game Time 7 is exclusive to this program. All right, Andrew Carmine wants to know. We talked about this last time we came on Game Time. Who is your pick to win the Western Conference?
If we're talking who's going to win, like just straight up who's going to win, I would say Colorado. If you're looking for a pick to get behind for future hedging purposes, or what people like to say, that word value gets misused so many times, but I would have to throw out, if I'm talking about the word value, I would say the Winnipeg Jets, because I like what I'm seeing from them, that they're at 7-1 right now. They're after the Golden Knights, they're after the Canucks, they're after the Stars, Avalanche, and the Oilers. But some moves they've made already, some trades, good defense, good goaltending at 7-1. And we see what happens every year in the playoffs. I mean, look what happened last year with the Kraken. The Kraken beating the Avalanche in the first round of the NHL playoffs. I think right now, if you want to take a shot on a team for a future in the Western Conference, I'd grab the Winnipeg Jets at 7-1. Anything else I think is a little bit too low. I mean, you could take the Avalanche at plus 450, but why not just bet them every game if you like them so much?
Yeah, that's probably a good point too. That's kind of the strategy that John Murray and I are using with the Yukon Huskies, since everybody that listens to that podcast wanted to bet the odds-on favorite. Technically, they were the Purdue Boilermakers.
Since I'm on here with you, Kelly, who else should I jump in? I've got Arizona 20-1, and I heard I was actually listening to your show, and as you know, I don't really cap college ball too much, but I did like to dabble into a few futures. Do you have any that I should jump in on right now? I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but
no worries. That's interesting. You talk about Arizona, and this is where it gets dicey for me. So I hardly ever have a futures bet, Andrew. And that's because I got invited to, we'll call it a West Texas oil money Calcutta League. And it's where you bid on teams after Selection Sunday, right? And you're allowed to even bid on the first 4N, in fact. And if a team wins, you get paid a portion of the pot. Well, of course, everybody bids on these high-profile teams. Last year, my team and I had Kansas State. We had San Diego State. We had Miami. There was some really great value teams. So I don't like to necessarily do futures bets, because I do feel like it is better if you like them, just bet them throughout the tournament, and then you can just stop betting them whenever you want, right? As opposed to trying to figure out a hedge, trying to figure out how far to let your money roll. I don't hate Arizona. My problem is they faltered a couple of times this year, most notably against Washington State. That was what was weird. I'm not saying Washington State doesn't have a solid defense, and I'm not saying that Washington State hasn't shown some real prowess. But Arizona was supposed to be, with Tommy Lloyd, a national championship contender every single year. And I'm not sure that they're a national contender this year. Losing both games to Washington State. We can throw out the Purdue on a neutral. We can throw out the Florida Atlantic on a neutral. Their losses have come on the road to Stanford, Washington State, and Oregon State. When you are in it deep, you're at March, you're at a regional, or you're, on the road anywhere, you want a team that is going to be able to play in that environment. And that is what kind of concerns me about this team. We'll see how they finish out the next 4 games. They should go 4-0. UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Arizona State left. I don't hate that, Andrew, but full disclosure, no futures bets for me. Let's see. Any more questions in the chat? I'm going to look for those right now over on the YouTube channel, see what we've got from you guys. But Andrew, really interesting tonight in the NBA. And we've seen this one move a little bit, but I'm curious as to your thoughts. There used to be years ago, and it was really prevalent in the WNBA even last summer, when you have any sort of travel issues. Somebody sent me a tweet from somebody who flies on the Pelicans team, plane, media person, said, hey, we're not taking off after getting no sleep, having issues, flying into Indiana late. I would not play on a team based on that information, but if I already liked a side, it could push me into definitely making it a wager. Do you have any opinion tonight on the Pels? They opened 3.5, now 6.5. Total is just plummeted, 243.5 down to 237.5 on the Wagertalk odds screen. I know you dabble in some NBA, so I kind of wanted to get your opinion there. Am I too late to bet the Pacers, or are the Pels just going to get run out of the building because they're exhausted?
I'm sitting here. Please, I hope the one you're about to talk about is the one I have an opinion on. But I actually like the first half here. I think that this is a spot. One thing about this, actually, no. First of all, I gotta rant for a second. I'm sick and tired of checking injury reports in the NBA. Can a guy just handicap? Can a guy just look at a breakdown? Like, I don't want that to be part of. Like, I actually feel for all the people that full time bet NBA every single day, and that's their main sport, because like the question marks next to guys' names drives me insane. But looking at this Indiana team, my Raptors actually knock off their 3-game winning streak, but they haven't really been losing 2 in a row quite often. That's what I look for with certain teams across many leagues, the ability to bounce back. Looking at some losses that they've had, losing obviously a tough one to Charlotte, they bounce back. Lose to Golden State, they bounce back against that one. Lose to Sacramento, they bounce back after that one. I look for certain teams that after dropping a game, whether it's a close loss or a blowout loss, for them to have the ability to bounce back. They are playing better defense. Everyone at the start of the year was talking about the pace that they play with, right? Talking about how fast they get up the floor, the way that they barely utilize the shot clock. And what I've noticed, when they're getting the success, they're actually managing the clock a lot better, getting in their half-court sets and kind of moving the ball a lot more. So I do like Indiana. I'm seeing, speaking of those question marks, I'm seeing a ton of question marks next to guys' names for the Pels, which is never a good thing. Second half of the back-to-back, you mentioned the travel issue, but Kelly, I'll throw it back to you with this. Second half of a back-to-back, I like fading those teams even more after they're coming off a win. Like, you're satisfied. You know what I mean? Like, if you have a back-to-back, sometimes if a team loses, the next game on the second half of a back-to-back, they still have that bad taste in their mouth. They're still so mad. They don't want to wait 3 days. They almost are more motivated that second day. So I like the fact the Pels won, and now they got that second half of a back-to-back. I'm more eager to fade them after a win than actually off a loss. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's a great angle to look at. I completely concur with your sentiments. If you remember last year, I was doing an NBA show with Ski, Hakeem Profit, as you guys know him on Wager Talk, and Jay Money, and we were just bitching and complaining about injury reports. And I think it's worse this year. I promised myself I was going to start looking into some more NBA after the All-Star break. I think now I just decided I'm just going to wait till the playoffs, because at least in the playoffs, we know who's going to play, right? Like
Right.
there is like little to no doubt, unless there was a significant injury. These guys are not taking a rest night. They're not nursing an injury. They are playing through it. So I agree with you, but I do think maybe the Pacers in the first half is worth a look here. Maybe Pels come out dragging a little ass. So shout out to Andrew from there. Yes. Coach Sam, you are right. It is on a 2-game skid, the ranked versus ranked or unranked favorite on 2-game skid. A&M tonight, we will be on them as well. Well, as Tennessee, we laid it with that team last night. If you guys ever want to see, you guys can go to Pickit, Pikkit. Download the app. You guys can see everything I play because it is attached to my betting account. Andrew, I got nothing else. I wanted to take the points tonight with UCF. I kind of waited around looking at Oklahoma State off that just absolute gut-wrenching loss to Oklahoma. If you remember, I was on them plus 1.5 there on Saturday. I'm not sure they bounce back here against a UCF team with Texas on deck, laying 2.5 with Oklahoma State, trying to come back on it. You and I spoke before we came on air about maybe sometimes it's okay to have a do not bet list. Like Mississippi State should have been on my do not bet list, but I could not help myself last night. What are your thoughts on coming back with a team that scorned you, if you will? So Oklahoma State lost by the hook in overtime because they did not make their free throws on Saturday. That was unfortunate for me. But now I'm kind of looking to fade them. Is that something that you feel like people often do based on emotion?
Sure, I'd have to say yes, but at the same time, you also learn from that team, right? And I think that I don't know if it was Ralph or everybody kind of has their own way of looking at things. But Ralph told me one time, he goes, Andrew, if you lose a pick and you're not happy about it, you have the right to be mad for about 2 or 3 hours. Then you got to move on, right? Then you have to look about, okay, what actually happened in that game. So, you watched that game, you looked at it, you might not have been cheering for that team, or you were cheering against them, or you were cheering for them. At the end of the day, you did learn something about that team. So whether it's betting on them or betting against them, and as I was telling you prior to the show starting about what happened to me with the LA Kings in hockey, big 5% play on them, they get blown out of the building. I got mad at them and they won 6 of their next 7 games. So to me, sometimes you want to still be able to follow a team, not be scared to jump in. But also, if I thought a team was good and then they don't turn out to be that same team, that's how I felt about the Islanders in hockey. I was looking at this Islanders team, kind of the new coach theory. They signed Patrick Waugh. I got on them for like 1 or 2 games and I was like, hold on, this team's still garbage. Like, they got a new coach and that doesn't work for every single time, right? Like, that's a fun theory to bet off of sometimes, but when it comes down to it, they're not very good. So I don't blame you if you switch from betting on a team and they screw you over and then you want to bet against them. I don't blame you at all.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit about it is between being stubborn and being like, I wasn't wrong. I know this team. Realizing I had a dead wrong read on this team, right? And that's kind of how I felt like this year in the NFL. So many of my plays came down to week 17, week 18, right? As far as a futures perspective that I gave out on Superbook. But there was a 7-game stretch where like Eagles fans were just slaughtering me. And they're like, you love betting against this team. And I'm like, I know I'm right on this team. And how much money did it end up costing me? Ultimately, I got revenge, right, with the Bucks in the playoffs. And I got to be right. And I got to make some money back. But that stretch was very frustrating. That stretch is now happening to me versus Iowa State. I am now 0-5 in college basketball betting against Iowa State. It's not that I'm betting against Iowa State necessarily. They just keep falling in that ranked versus ranked on the road. Hey, they're covering. But tonight, this is way too many points. This is way too many points, Andrew.
Okay.
And I cannot. I cannot bet against Iowa State, though. I cannot. I am 0-5. So am I dead wrong on this team? I want to take the Sooners plus 9.5. Hilton Coliseum, Andrew, is one of the most electric places from a home court advantage. I made this game 7. The game is 9.5. I should be all over Oklahoma, but they have not been great on the road outside of winning at Kansas State. They're just 1-8 in their last 9 games in Hilton, and they have just been absolutely atrocious. I don't want to bet against Iowa State, and I keep telling myself that I'm going to kick myself in the ass tonight when Oklahoma loses this game by 6. And that's why I had to ask your opinion. I just had a vent.
Do you bet team totals?
So that's a thing that I actually have had other people ask me. I think it was Andy Lang was asking me why I didn't bet team totals. I bet the Chiefs under 23.5 team total with my good friend John Murray on the Super Bowl. That's about how team totals go for me, Andrew.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, that's the thing, like the frustration you're showing, like that's immediately what I was thinking, like, because you're like half joking, but you're half like, what should I do in this situation? If you want to fade a team, but you haven't had good success fading them, why not just take the other team's team total over or take that team's team total under? Like one thing I've done a lot when I've been trying to, in that same situation, is just take the other team to just not have as good of a night as expected. You know, how do you think that team's going to suffer? If you're fading them, you either expect them to just simply get outscored that night, you know, with obviously the other team outscoring them to win, or do you expect them to get shut down defensively? And if that's the case, you can take their team total under and just root against them that way.
That's not a bad angle to look at. Yeah. See, I didn't love the Niners in the Super Bowl, and that's where John Murray and I came up with. I was like, I'll throw something together with the Niners money line, but I'm not laying, massive amount of juice on the Super Bowl in a coin flip situation. And he was like, we should go back to the well, taking the Chiefs team total under. And it was glorious, Andrew. Until, of course, it wasn't.
They costed me. The Niners costed me, Kelly. All my props hit. But the Niners, that was my only loss.
I should have just bet I should have just bet the alternate prop over 5.5 field goals because I loved it to be a field goal fest, and I could have cashed it like 4 or 5 to 1. It is.
Those videos were killing me. Those videos of you, they were killing me.
I was killing me. I was like, why did I do this? That is the one thing I think, and I was talking to my buddy Clint about this the other night from a handicapping perspective before I let you go. Not only what we were talking about, how you should not be emotional. You should not double down. We know this from a bankroll perspective. We should also admit that we are maybe wrong about a team. But one of the things that I think gets people early is when they loved a side and they didn't bet enough on it, right? Now, I didn't go crazy on the Super Bowl because I didn't love anything, but the over 3.5 field goals was my favorite bet, yet I bet everything for the same number of units. Does that make sense? So curiosity, how you like to do it. Are you a flat unit better, right? So for example, in college football, I bet significantly more than I do other sports because I feel like I actually have an edge. But in NFL, college basketball, very traditionally, do I ever have a 2 or 3 unit play?
Well, I respect the Wagertalk, scale, the 1 to 5, but the percentage wise of the bankroll. But overall, for me, Kelly, I've always been more of a 1 to 3. That kind of the middle ranking, then kind of the I don't love it, but I'm playing it, and then the best bet material. But I agree with you. I think that I've looked at that, and that's how I feel a lot of times when I'm self-reflecting. If I'm auditing myself, quote unquote, going through my plays, because at Wagertalk, if you have, let's say a winning night record wise, but the 1 and 2% were the winners and you dropped your 4%ers, then you just feel horrible. So sometimes you think to yourself, should I have just made every single play a 3 or all plays a 2? So I definitely lean more towards the flat betting side of things, but I'd certainly say it's definitely a talent to be able to kind of select those best bets. Would you agree that that's correlated with volume though? Like if you're a lower volume person, you can do that, but if you're a higher volume, you have to keep it low.
Well, I would actually say, okay, so did you listen to the Billy Walters, Joe Rogan segment? If you guys haven't listened to it, I highly recommend it. Billy talks about his unit size being the varying difference between his line and the bookmaker's line, which I agree with.
Yes, I was listening to that today. I started it
I
today.
agree with him. I do agree with him, but I do think that a majority of bettors needing to practice good bankroll management and understand Billy bets, from what I've been told, less than 100 games a year, right? Like now I've heard it's even significantly less, but in his heyday, he was not betting significant numbers of games. So I think you absolutely nailed it with the volume. If you are a high volume, meaning you play a ton of games, I do think the flat bets are better, right? So I had 9 games on Saturday and I was like, you know what? I'm betting these all the same. These are system plays. There's a few Big 12 home dogs that I like, which essentially went 2-2 if you include K-State that Marco gave me. But Kentucky, I loved. And of course, I had the same on it that I had on K-State. So I just was kind of curious how your process is, how you work past it. There it is. Appreciate you guys all hanging out tonight with Andrew and I at McInnes Picks over on X as well as Instagram. Andrew puts out a ton of great content here on the Wagertalk Instagram channel. So make sure you guys are giving him a follow. Always great chatting with you, Andrew. Andrew has an MLB special right now through the All-Star break. That means you can get him for the first half of the year for $349. That is just $3 a day. Andrew will be giving you guys some absolute under winners. Last year, he was the number 2 handicapper at Wagertalk in totals. That was 30 units. And then, of course, he ended the season on a 70% run. You always love to see that kind of stuff. You want to jump on when the guys are hot. I am not hot right now. 0-3 this week on my picks. So we're going to turn it around tonight. We laid it with A&M. We laid it with Tennessee. I'm going to take a few more minutes. I may look at this Oklahoma-Iowa State game just one more time. I hope you have a wonderful night. We'll be back here tomorrow night on the Wagertalk Instagram channel with Adam Trigger and CT Betts of the Hustle Pod.